dynasty, you're talking Devy. You know my guys is never shook. It's time to sit down and let the Degens cook. That's right. You know they coming through and getting heavy. It's time to talk some dynasty and talk some Devy. My guys is never shook. Time to sit down and let the Degens cook. Ow!
Welcome back to episode 13 of Devy Degens this year. As always, I am Noah Green, and with me is Todd Vincent. Todd, we got to episode 13, man. How was your weekend?
It was good. I think I split my semifinals matchups in my C2C league, so I got a couple teams in the finals. It's not bad, 25% or so with pretty
good,
super heavy Devy rosters as well too. We talked a little off air about people selling their souls for CFF assets going.
Yeah,
it's just something I'm not going to do. 13 episodes, pretty interesting too. That's 13 straight weeks of telling people not to draft Devy quarterbacks and telling everyone that Travion Henderson's their RB1 in the 24 class.
Yeah, it's working out well for us actually. It's played out true. Yeah, I was my C2C portfolio, I guess, is, well, I have 3 teams. 2 of them I drafted. I'm one of 2 in the finals, so I guess I'm 50% of the teams I drafted. I'm not counting the orphan I took. Yeah, it was interesting. It was a tough. I won by less than 1 point and was watching the San Jose State game because the guy I was playing against, shout out to Believeland if he's listening, was playing Kyrie Robinson from San Jose State, who got a late touchdown and pulled him within 1 point. And I had gone ahead. I thought I was out, but I went ahead on the garbage time Neighbors touchdown and was just thrilled about that. And again, I really thought about making some trades this week and just decided to hold firm rather than giving up a bunch of future assets or freshmen who have upside in order to get seniors who are going to produce for a couple games. I decided to hold firm on that just because, again, it's C2C. So your rosters carry over and those trades have consequence, and you want to take like we talk all the time about wanting to increase the number of chances we have at getting high-end Devy assets. So held firm and got real lucky to sneak into the finals, and we'll see how it all goes this week. And hopefully it'll go well, but it's been a fun ride in the C2C world. Got to watch a little bit of football. We were talking off air about this, just a couple of things that I just cannot get my head around. It just came to my attention that Iowa is 9-2 and ranked 16th in the country and is number 1 in the Big Ten West. And they have not scored more than 20 points in 6 games. They might be the worst 9-2 team ever, and they are playing in the Big Ten, and it's kind of hilarious. They don't play Michigan or Ohio State, so that's what it is. They don't have a shot at getting to I don't think they can get to the Big Ten title game, but maybe they can actually. Is the Big Ten title game by division, or is it the top 2 teams?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they changed it or not. It used to be by division, I think, because we had this happened a couple years in a row where they ended up playing in the championship despite them doing the same thing every year, scoring 20 points a game.
Yeah, it's wild that they are still, like, they fired their offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz in the middle of the year because they weren't scoring any points, and there you go. Yeah. Let's see. Nope, it is the champion of the West Division will play the champion of the East Division. So Iowa, barring a loss this weekend, they will be in the Big Ten championship again, regardless, which is just unbelievable. And what on Auburn got waxed by New Mexico State, dude? Like, what on earth is going on with that?
I have no clue. That's embarrassing for an SEC team.
It is embarrassing, and it should, like, we've talked about, like, some of the recruits that we like I know Cam Coleman talked about possibly flipping from A&M to Auburn, and I know Perry Thompson's going to Auburn. Like, I hope. I don't know. I hold out hope that those guys have some kind of second thought, because man, that's just ugly to get whacked. I mean, 38-10 is not is to New Mexico State for Auburn is no bueno, to say the least. Who they play? They play Nebraska. Iowa plays Nebraska. They could lose to Nebraska. Actually, I could see them losing to Nebraska.
I doubt it. Is Jeff Sims playing quarterback again?
No, it's Purdy's little brother.
Yeah.
Who apparently runs 20.7 miles per hour.
Everyone does. Every single player.
Every player runs
between 20 and 22.7 miles per hour.
Oh, it's so true.
There's a burgeoning Twitter account and global conglomerate business starting up that tracks all of this stuff in depth, and yeah, they all do. Everyone's fast.
It's true. So yeah, this episode, we're really excited about this episode. We're gonna play a little this or that. The 24 draft class talk is ramping up, and we want to hit some high level prospects and talk about them compared to some high level NFL prospects, and let you know our thoughts on how we value those guys at the moment, and are really excited to have you all listening to this. These are the types of conversations that are really exciting for this work we do when guys come on the precipice of the NFL transition. So we're going to hit some of these very challenging questions early that I imagine will be legitimate questions in dynasty startups in just a couple of months that we're going to hit on. We have a couple of Devy specific options in there, but we're mostly focused on the 24 class transitioning into the NFL and an NFL prospect for these players. And we're really excited to talk with you about that. But I know before that, the other thing that's big news in the college football world is the transfer portal talk. And we've had a rash of announcements of quarterbacks that are going to come back to school: Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart, Shedeur Sanders, and some transfer implications there, and some coaching changes as well. And I'm curious, starting we can start with Quinn Ewers as an example. But what are your thoughts in general on this whole on the portal situation, especially when it pertains to QBs? Because I think that's a big part of the conversation right now, is around some of these high-end freshman QBs and what they're going to do and whether they're going to say go whatever.
Yeah, I think there's kind of this naivety, I think, with Devy players when it comes to quarterbacks and situations and things just panning out for them. I think we've been spoiled a little bit lately with a couple of classes where like the Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields top end prospects went kind of wire to wire as top end prospects, even though Fields got jumped a bit in the NFL draft, but he was still up there, and he was a top end talent the whole way through. But we've seen this past year with Devin Brown at Ohio State and Ty Simpson at Alabama. A lot of people had them pegged to take these jobs as early as their sophomore season. And then now this is kind of the talk going around with Arch. Is Quinn Ewers is back. Is Arch going to start over him next year, or Arch going to transfer? I think Arch will probably transfer, just because I don't think the whole Manning family and with all the NIL available to him, and he was pretty sought after as a prospect. I don't think he'll sit for another year. But people kind of have this thing where they think he's Quinn Ewers hasn't proven anything, so Arch will just start over him next year because he was such a high-end prospect. And I don't think people really take into account how big business college football is, especially to the coaches and stuff, and the staffs, and there's massive staffs. There's massive implications, this kind of stuff. And even when it goes to smaller schools beyond Texas, Aiden Childs at Oregon State is a guy that a lot of people in the C2C community especially really liked, and everyone's kind of been pounding the table for him to start over DJU, who's there. And people, if you sit back and look at it, going into this weekend, Oregon State was 11th ranked in the country. So they're in line to play maybe a New Year's Six bowl even, which would be huge money coming into the program. a huge boost for the head coach who's making probably tens of millions of dollars. Like this kind of stuff matters beyond what you think of the incoming quarterback freshman who you think's a better athlete or whatever than a guy like DJU who everyone already considers a bust. And I think like DJU, if you look at his NFL potential, he's probably not what we thought he was. I think that's pretty safe to say at this point. But also, if he comes back next year and uses up his last year of eligibility, it's pretty naive, I think, to assume that Childs is going to start over him when he's going to lead a team to they're 8-3 now. They could finish 9-3 with a bowl win, 10-3. It's pretty naive to think that the coach is going to sit back and be like, well, you got us to 10-3 last year in a bowl win, but this kid's got some tools, so we're just going to start him over you. Like that stuff's not going to happen. There's a huge list going back of recruits who these guys, they're 4 and 5 star recruits, high end recruits, and some of them just don't ever play because so much of it is like situational. So much of it is everything lining up at the right time. And these high end schools like the Ohio States and the Alabamas and all those schools, they have a kid coming every year. They sometimes they'll skip a year with the high end recruit, but almost every year they have a high 4 star, borderline 5 star kid that they're bringing in, and they're telling these kids that they got a chance to start and they're going to compete for the job. And maybe it's true and maybe it's not, but these coaches don't have extreme loyalty to these players. So there's nothing guaranteed for them. There's just a huge number of guys who will just go by the wayside that they never get their chance to play because stuff just doesn't line up for them.
Yeah, no, it's true. And what's interesting is even for guys who went to programs where they, I think, thought there was an assumption that they would sit out their freshman year and then start in their sophomore year, those programs may actually go out and get a more experienced QB recruit to come in and transfer and start over them. Like, I'm an SC alum. Lincoln Riley is coaching for his job next year after this season. Do I think that Malachi Nelson is guaranteed to be the starting quarterback for SC? Absolutely not. Do I think that Lincoln Riley has been talking to guys like Riley Leonard and guys like Michael Pratt, maybe at Tulane, and some of these other QBs that are potentially transfers? Absolutely. I think he's been talking to them. Do I think he's going to go after Arch? Probably not, because he's already got, if he's going to go with a freshman, he may as well go with the guy he recruited that he has on his team already. But we've seen examples of that before where programs have brought in an outside transfer, and that outside transfer has started over the presumptive sort of next guy, either being a freshman or a sophomore. And that could absolutely happen at a program like SC. I could see Miami bringing in a transfer QB rather than going to Emory Williams. Cristobal also is, these guys are, like you said, these guys are making millions and millions of dollars. And these are programs that have very high expectations, and they need to meet those expectations. And they need a guy in there that they think can actually win, not a developmental project.
Yeah, and there'll be tons of situations like that. Like Oregon is going to be in that boat. Washington's going to be in that boat.
Yep.
Then you got schools like Oklahoma is moving to the SEC. Dylan Gabriel still has a year of eligibility left as well. So I know people are down on him as not an NFL quarterback, but this isn't the NFL. Like you've seen what he's done this year. He's put up massive numbers. He was like a top 3 probably Heisman contender until they dropped a couple games. So there's no guarantee that like Jackson Arnold is just going to take that job from him next year. If they're playing for their lives, they're playing for their livelihood, their coaches' jobs are on the lines. It's just not as simple as plugging in a 5-star kid because he's got tools. Like that stuff doesn't happen, and it's a real narrow-minded approach to drafting. And I think it's not like, besides the quarterback valuation being so hard, it's just can be a waste of a draft pick. And like it's just another wrinkle in the whole scheme of things when it comes to drafting quarterbacks and Devy quarterbacks and using those premium assets, where I don't think people really think it out that far. And like if you got these guys, like people say like they hold value because they have value insulation or whatever. But we said the same thing. People said the same things with Devin Brown and Ty Simpson, and now it's 2 years down the road. Now they have zero value. You can't trade them. You're giving them away. They've not accrued any value. You just burn you just like burnt those draft picks up.
No, it's true. Yeah, we've seen it before. I think we'll continue to see it, and it's definitely been a learning lesson for me being new to the format. And I definitely made some of the guys that we've mentioned. I definitely have on some C2C rosters. If I have them, I'm keeping them because, like you said, they're not going to net me anything in a trade value. And if they do transfer, like if Ty Simpson transfers and gets a chance to start, he could at the very least be a CFF producer for a few years. And so I'm going to hold on at this point rather than. I mean, if someone's really interested, I'll certainly have a conversation about it. But at this point, you're holding. But looking back on it, the value that those guys were getting in drafts was just too high, and we should be taking these things into account when we're thinking about drafting quarterbacks and evaluating freshman incoming quarterbacks as well. Same way.
Yeah, I think it falls back to like the principal difference between Devy and C2C is that you're never going to accumulate points on the college side in Devy. It's just a value game. So you're just taking way too much of a risk.
Yep, 100%. With that said, this week, as we said, we're gonna jump into some this or that and ask some pretty I don't know if controversial is the right word or spicy, but we're gonna ask some important questions that, again, I think are going to be questions that are going to come up in startup drafts of all formats. I think they're going to be, especially for dynasty startup drafts, but of course also for C2C and Devy drafts coming up. And we're going to pit some incoming NFL prospects against some current NFL really prized assets and let you know what we think and which way we're going in terms of how we value them. So with that said, let's get to our first one, which is this or that: Marvin Harrison Jr. or CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, this one should be the most debatable, I think, on the whole docket that we have. But for me, it's one of the easiest ones because I've been out there saying since August or before August that Marvin Harrison Jr. is my wide receiver 3 in Dynasty the second he gets drafted, behind Jefferson and Chase. I don't think I'm changing that now, even though CeeDee Lamb's having a phenomenal season. I just think that Marvin Harrison Jr., if everything falls right for him, he just has that extra gear to go up another tier and become so much more valuable, I think, than CeeDee Lamb. I think his value is already pretty close to it because if you play in any leagues where you can acquire him and trade him, it's almost impossible to get a hold of him. And people are already on this kind of wavelength where they're not even penciling him in. They're writing his name in pen as a top 5 for sure wide receiver, dynasty wide receiver. 3 might be a little bit aggressive, and I could see people not wanting to play this way as well, like where they're like, "Oh, you're crazy, CeeDee Lamb's, an all pro." But I think that the thing along with Marvin Harrison Jr. is that his floor is extremely high too. Like I don't think, barring injury, I don't see there's any way that he's not a top 10 dynasty wide receiver at worst for his career. So, I mean, I'll take that swing that he hits. There's a outside possibility he's the dynasty wide receiver 1 in like a year or 18 months from now.
Yeah, it is definitely possible. I guess the question is, when you're weighing value versus production, and like as you said, look, CeeDee Lamb this year is producing, and I think we can safely say he's just entering his prime. So I think we can safely say for the next 3-4 years, barring injury, barring some kind of massive titanic shift, CeeDee Lamb's going to be a pretty solidified top 5 actual producer on your rosters, on a redraft roster, on a dynasty roster, on any roster. And you're willing to, you think Marvin Harrison Jr. is that good that you're willing to take that over CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, I do. It's definitely, there's definitely risk involved in it, and like this is just a pick your preference, right? We're not talking an actual trade or whatever the case. There's like if you're in this league, there's still a possibility. I don't think you're getting it with Marvin Harrison Jr., but there's still a possibility that if you're that certain about it, you could still get a plus on top of him to trade CeeDee Lamb. I think Marvin is like, of these guys we're going to go through, I think he's the one that I don't think anyone's giving a plus on. I think everyone's kind of in the same boat. Unless you've had him for multiple seasons, you kind of sold your soul to get him this season. So I don't think you're probably getting a plus on top of it, but there's the potential. Depends how risk averse your league mates are, I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw Marvin Harrison Jr. get traded once around a Devy draft time, and it was for AJ Brown plus. So that was before the season started. So certainly with the season he's had, I think his value is sitting there, and I can see some people being willing to do a straight up trade. I don't know if there's anyone who's going to add a plus to Marvin, even for a guy like CD, but I could see somebody doing it straight up. So where do you see Marvin Harrison Jr. in terms of redraft next year? Is he in the wide receiver 2 tier for you for next year immediately? Is that a floor even as a rookie for you, given what kind of prospect he is?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see, because whoever drafts him is going to draft him with he's going to go with top 5 in the NFL draft.
Right.
So he's going to be on that like Jamar Chase level prospect on that trajectory. Yeah, I don't see any way he's not like a top 6 to 8 guy next year for redraft. I guess people might depend on his situation, his quarterback play. Some people might get scared off.
Right.
Even then, I'm not worried about it. Like, worst case scenario is like we see what happened. What's happening with Garrett Wilson with Zach Wilson, but I mean, I'm not going to play hesitant for that reason. Like, there's lots of instances of terrible quarterbacks being just fine for fantasy wise for production for wide receivers. Like basically all of DeAndre Hopkins' career, basically.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, like there are elite wide receivers have shown the ability to be QB proof, and so I kind of am with you, and I do think the situation will probably scare some people off. This is absolutely the hardest one to choose, and I think it's one where I think this year we will see. When Marvin Harrison Jr. is drafted, he will immediately have a dynasty value higher than CeeDee Lamb, and he will immediately have an ADP higher than CeeDee Lamb in dynasty drafts. And it'll be super interesting to see how that pans out, because I think over the years, what we've seen is that the dynasty community has pushed further and further to value rookies higher, because guys like Jefferson, Chase, when you can hit on those guys, it's such a value. So Jackson Smith and Jigba getting picked 20th overall after sitting out his entire last season at Ohio State, and was immediately valued as a top 12 consensus dynasty wide receiver. So I think to say that Marvin Harrison Jr. won't be valued as a top 12, like he will have a first round ADP in dynasty startups immediately, as just right when he enters the league. And it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out for him and how that plays out for everybody. Is he a different level prospect than some of the other guys I was just mentioning?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I think he's probably a better prospect than Jamar Chase was, because we've seen 2 years of it. And he wasn't, if people don't remember, he wasn't that high. Like, he was a top rated receiver in his class, but he was like wide receiver 14 in his class, right? He wasn't wide receiver 1 or 2 like Chase was, or Egbuka, or JSN. I think 2 years of it, plus his size, plus his athleticism, what he can be, like, he's got everything going for him. Plus the bloodlines matter. Like when you have Hall of Fame bloodlines, like when you're living up to the same potential and your dad was a Hall of Fame wide receiver, that stuff matters. I don't think, like, it's hard to make an argument for him outside the top 6, even being hesitant. Like you can have like once you get past Lamb and I think AJ Brown, you can make the argument AJ Brown is still in the same tier
Sure.
as
Oh, yeah.
CeeDee Lamb. After that, like with the seasons we're seeing from guys like Drake London, Olave, Waddle, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, like Marvin's easily over those guys.
Oh, easy.
Like
Not
head and
close.
shoulders above those guys. So
It's not close.
So I don't think it's outrageous to say like if like say you value him at the bottom of the tier, even being a little cautiously optimistic, saying I have like CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Marvin at the bottom of that tier, but in the same tier. Why not shoot for the upside that he surpasses them?
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and I think from a value perspective, he's likely to have pretty decent value insulation. He will have to produce early enough. He's not going to have the value will start to take somewhat of a hit. I just think the likelihood that he doesn't produce enough to keep his value in at least the top 10 for his rookie season is pretty unlikely given what he's done and what he's shown and his profile and his traits. I think it's very unlikely. There is risk involved with it, but I do just think it's incredibly unlikely. And when receivers who are as talented as him doing it on the level that he's doing it are coming into this draft, the likelihood that they don't hit, it's just far more infrequent than it is frequent. So I think although there is risk, I think there's also insulation. And if you're shooting for upside, Marvin's the guy. Do I think that CeeDee Lamb will outscore Marvin Harrison Jr. next year in NFL Dynasty? Yeah, I think he probably will. Most likely. Do I think it's impossible that Marvin Harrison Jr. outscores him even next year? No, it's not impossible. He could have a Chase-like rookie year. And if he gets in a situation, if he goes, for example, to the Cardinals and gets a QB like Kyler Murray and becomes the immediate number one receiver there, is there a chance he has one of those really special rookie years? Absolutely. So he's one that's worth it. Going on to the next one, this one is going to be a little more, I think, this one is going to be a little more spicy. So we've got Jonathan Taylor versus Travion Henderson. Todd, this is your favorite. You've been talking about this one all season long.
Yeah, this is like the specific example I brought up like 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, when I said that I still think Travion Henderson, even before we started having these games in a row where people remember what kind of prospect he was, I said I still think he's on par, on the course to be like a top 5 dynasty running back. And this is specifically like versus Jonathan Taylor. I think this is like a smash where you want to get out on a guy like Jonathan Taylor at this point, where he got paid, he's getting that second contract, he's going into year 5, I guess, next year. I mean, that's basically when you want to cash in on premium running backs, right? And he's been banged up over the last couple of years, and then he had the holdout this year, but he really hasn't strung together more than a season and a half of that top end like premium scoring. And even then it wasn't on the same level as like a Christian McCaffrey or whatever. He was the RB1, but I think it was like the lowest scoring season by an RB1 in like a 6 or 8 year span on top of that too. So I think if you can get, like I said, this doesn't have to be a trade 1-for-1, but I think like if you can get a plus on top of Travion for Jonathan Taylor, this is where I would do it. And I think going into dynasty drafts next year, I mean, the guys typically that hit their ceiling as running backs as RB1s, their production comes in the first 3 years of their career, right? It's not a guy like Travion. If someone drafts, say like, I don't know, say the Bengals move on from Joe Mixon and they draft Travion Henderson in the second round, like you want him that first year, that you want that first 3 seasons, but the first season you expect him to come out of the gate and score at a like RB1 clip, right? I just think I laughed. I joked about it in the Discord yesterday. I said like the Devy community doesn't deserve Travion Henderson as a prospect anymore. Like just the way that people talked about it and just disregarded him like the start of the season was like I can't believe people forgot how good he was from his freshman season. His freshman season was phenomenal. Last year he was banged up all year. We knew he was banged up. We knew he played through an injury. I know people were like, well, I need to see him come out. We saw it, but then he sat out a couple games. But that's just the way it's going to be. Like you're going to see a lot more of that in the transfer era and the NIL era, and especially with top teams like Ohio State who have like 4 and 5-star kids as their backups or second, third, fourth string kids at those positions. Like there's no need to play him if he's even the slightest bit banged up. There's no reason for him to play through an injury in his junior year before the draft when they really only play like 2 games a year that they even risk losing. And I mentioned this earlier when I said like don't be surprised when they rest him a bit. He doesn't play every game, and then they lean on him heavily when they get down the stretch in these close games that they absolutely need to win. And it's exactly what they've done. I think it's even like I don't think he's even showcased how good of a talent he still is, because Kyle McCord's not been good for that team. Last year, the year before, like they had CJ Stroud and Justin Fields, and they ran up the score on teams. They were scoring 40, 50, 60 points a game against these like bottom tier teams or mid-level teams stuff. Then they only had to like show up for those 2, like the Michigan game and Penn State basically every year. This year they haven't been doing that. They've been scoring like 22 points, 24 points against like the Rutgers, and they struggled early against like a Youngstown State team. And I just don't think he's showcased exactly how good he is. And I think now with Jonathan Brooks being injured, that like the drop off from Travion from RB1 to whoever you have as your RB2 in this class is enormous. Like I can see people not having like Travion on the same level as Bijan as a prospect. He was after his freshman year. There was people, well-respected people that know what they're talking about, people with a track record of hitting on Devy players. That was an honest discussion. There was people who preferred Travion because of his overall skill set to Bijan. So I can see not having him on quite that same level as a prospect as Bijan, but I think that the gap between him and the RB2 is way bigger than the gap from Bijan to Gibbs was last year.
You think it's fair to say he's going to be the biggest value of upcoming dynasty rookie drafts?
Yeah, I think so. No matter where he goes, because I don't think he's going to be a first round pick. I think he'll still go in the second round. He'll probably go similar to where Jonathan Taylor went in like the mid 30s, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see any way he's not the first running back off the board. And I think, we've talked about it plenty that there's, I'd say bare minimum of 4, but I'd say there's 5 to 6 first round wide receivers. And I don't think like
at least
the way running backs have
7, maybe 4 to 7.
Maybe it's possible, but the way running backs have gone both in the NFL and in college, and especially people who like held Bijan on this super high pedestal and we're not seeing the fantasy points come. Like, not a knock on him as a player, he's still a premium asset, but I can see people just being hesitant on like pushing their chips in and just be like, and we have at least the 2 quarterbacks who are set on being first round picks too, and there could be 1 or 2 more of those guys. So if we get 3 first round quarterbacks and 5 to 7 first round wide receivers, there's no way like Travion's going at the back end of the first round at the earliest, and maybe start of the second. I like mocks. I've seen him going in the 2-2-3 range for mocks.
Yep.
And there's no way. Like I'll have so many shares of him if he's going in that range. Because once you get past say Neighbors and Emeka probably at wide receiver, I'm taking the shot on Travion hitting his ceiling as a running back over any of the other wide receivers that are going in the first round.
When you think about Travion compared to this year's rookie class with Bijan, Gibbs, and then Achane, and then kind of the rest, and there are a couple of others that might have some pop, but none have hit. Those 3 have shown high level future potential, and besides that, not. How do you rank him in that class as a prospect?
I think somewhere between Gibbs and Achane, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, it's difficult to look back on because we know, like,
of course,
there was a couple people that were high on Achane, but there wasn't a lot of people that had this kind of fantasy implications for him. And even seeing it, like we've seen most are like play this. A lot of it's system, right? Like not to say that HM wouldn't produce on his own in a different system, but obviously there's a bump there with the way that Miami plays, and Miami's put up points against especially lesser competition. I just think Gibbs receiving in, like, if you're playing full PPR formats, I think puts him ahead of Travion. But I think, like, as a complete skill set as a running back, I think Travion's probably a better all around running back than Gibbs. I just don't think he has like that same trump card in the receiving game where, like, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going to have the Alvin Kamara and CMC type years. He's going to have the years where he has 70, 80 catches, and it's just going to happen. Where I think Travion Henderson's probably like he's probably going to get the 35 to 50 receptions if he gets the lead back role in the right system. But I think we've definitely, up to this point, people are all over it now, especially you see with people who aren't even in the Devy space that are like dynasty accounts and stuff on Twitter. They're digging into the classes and stuff now. I don't know anyone that has another running back ahead of Travion Henderson anymore. I don't think you ever should have, but that's not the point, I guess. But I think people were really, really getting ahead of themselves trying to find the next guy when it comes to his prospect profile, because I think it was always there, right from his pedigree as like a 5-star recruit to his freshman season and I heard people talk about, well, his freshman season isn't that impressive when you think of he had CJ Stroud and those receivers. And I think the counter argument is it is that impressive because they had a national championship caliber team.
Right.
And after 2 or 3 games in the season, they're like, this is our guy. We have 2 other 4-stars on the team. We have other people there. He's not going to make or break us, but like the running back position was never going to make or break their team. But what he did brought another element that could elevate the whole offense. I think that speaks to his caliber as an athlete, his caliber as a running back, and just what he can bring to an offense.
Yeah, and for context, compare that to our current freshman running back class. Compare that to guys like CJ Baxter, Justice Haynes, who went to premium programs that are competing for conference titles and looking to get into the playoffs and have been fighting for that. And they aren't getting, I mean, it took Jonathan Brooks' ACL tear for CJ Baxter to get run, and Justin Haynes has not surpassed McClellan and Jam Miller and those guys there. McClellan's had the role most of the year, and even Roydell Williams, those guys are getting that run. And it's not to say that Justice Haynes and CJ Baxter aren't talented. It's just to highlight how special of it, because that room that Travion took over as a true freshman had guys at the talent level that these Alabama and Texas rooms have. Like, just factually, they had that level of prospect in there, and Travion got that role. So I think you're absolutely right. It's important not to overlook that, and got it in a national championship competition year for them. All right, Travion Henderson. Yes, and I agree. He is RB1 pretty consensus. He's pretty consensus RB1 now, but he is still, I think, being valued really low relative to the rest of the word. What I see a lot of is, so Travion's RB1, but it arguably doesn't even matter because there are no top tier running backs in this class, period. That's the new kind of line that I'm hearing a lot of. And I think what we're suggesting here is take a second look and ask yourself a question of whether Travion has that tier 1 upside, because he probably does. All right, the next one has been getting a lot of play the last couple of days because tight ends are all of a sudden at the center of the dynasty world, because you see a lot of young tight ends coming in and taking over. So our this or that question is Dalton Kincaid or Brock Bowers.
Oof, this one's tough. This one is more difficult for me because I'm not a big heavy tight end guy, as you know.
Yep.
And Brock Bowers is pretty special talent. There are like some questions about his size at the next level, but I don't think he's much different than Kincaid size wise. So, and he's a special athlete for the tight end position. It just, I'm big on on talent over situation, usually, but it's hard to ignore the situation that Kincaid is in,
Yes,
especially when we've had like the rumblings of like Stephon Diggs not being overly happy the last couple of years. There's been like, it seems like every 2 or 3 weeks there's rumblings of him wanting out or him not happy with his role. There was talk this preseason about him wanting to play with his brother in Dallas a little bit. And I just think for the tight end position, it's almost like I've talked about it before, where it's like a perfect storm of talent and situation, and these guys that tend to be like get these Travis Kelce type production and long-term roles, they're almost always in thin wide receiver rooms on high-end offenses. And I don't think you can have a better one than where Kincaid is right now. And especially if there's a chance that Diggs moves on. Like if there's a chance Diggs moves on and Kincaid is the top option in that passing offense. And Buffalo, if you follow them, they've shown a propensity to not overly value the wide receiver position in the draft. They've gone the G5 route with Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir. And then they had like Cole Beasley in there playing the slot. Like they haven't targeted guys highly in the draft. And if they're comfortable doing that if Diggs walks away and they think they can add another third round wide receiver and get production playing in an offense led by Josh Allen, then I think this is one where I lean situation. I think this is one where I have a hard time moving off of Kincaid, seeing what we've already seen in that offense with Josh Allen, and knowing that Brock Bowers is going to be probably a top 15 pick, but I don't know that there's that many situations where you walk in and you're the top passing option in an NFL offense.
Yep. I'm with you 100%. I'm going Kincaid, and I also it's the talent situation tension is high. I think potentially my glasses are colored by Kyle Pitts, and maybe everyone's should be, just because you had Kyle Pitts was another elite level athlete at the tight end position, absolutely unique, incredible draft capital, walked into what seemed like a perfect situation, and it absolutely did not work out. He has had 0 high-end QB play since he started. He showed flashes as a rookie for sure, had a really good rookie season actually, and then completely, some of it was injury had an impact, but he wasn't producing before the injury either in his second season. And I think I definitely have Kincaid higher right now, and I would take Kincaid over Bowers at the moment, at the very least, until we see where Bowers goes. That's where the risk reward tension just doesn't match up for me, because I think the risk of Bowers going to a situation where I don't know what his role is actually going to look like is higher. And I think you're going to have some immediate high end production from Kincaid, with what he's showing is a very high floor every single week and a potentially high ceiling when you factor in touchdowns and, potentially even garnering a higher and higher target share as it goes along. He's just got a solidified role. His snap count is almost at 100% right now. And I don't think the Knox doesn't concern me coming back. He has shown enough that Knox is going to be nothing other than a second inline guy, and is going to allow Kincaid to even spend less time in line than he is right now and split out more. And he's not going to take Kincaid off the field. So I think having him tied as the clear number 2 option with an opportunity to even become the number 1 option, like you said, makes him the bet there. And that's not a slight on Bowers or what I think about him as a prospect. I think if it's just on a raw prospect basis, I would take Bowers over Kincaid on raw prospect tools basis, but I'm not going to in Dynasty, at least until I find out where Bowers is going and what that situation looks like.
Yeah, I that's where I am too. I think you can make a strong argument that Kincaid's the tight end 1 in Dynasty.
I think he is. I think he's the tight end 1 in Dynasty right now.
Because
sure.
at some point you gotta get off Kelce. He's like 37 years old, and then Andrews is going to be another year older coming off this injury. Yeah, I think.
And it's not Laporta. Like this is the offense situation, right? To me, we talked about this in the Degens Discord when we were talking about Kincaid versus Laporta, and I love Laporta. I have Laporta. I have a bunch of Laporta shares, bought in on Laporta, but he doesn't have the offense. He doesn't have the same share of the offense that Kincaid does, and he isn't going to, because there's a lot of mouths to feed around there, and he's going to be awesome. He's going to be he's a top 5 for sure, probably top 4 for me, but Kincaid's the tight end 1 for me as well. All right, this one is going to be fun. Are we taking this or that? Are we taking Chris Olave or Malik Neighbors?
Yeah, this is one that I think it's actually a little easier this year than it would have been last year, because I don't think Olave is producing at the same level or taking the steps that people thought he was going to. But I think as a prospect, I think it's Neighbors easily. Just what he's done as a junior, true junior in the SEC. And we saw what he did as a sophomore playing alongside Butte last year and made him like kind of replaceable in the offense. I just think Neighbors has, and I think Neighbors is going to get similar draft capital. I don't think he's going past I think he's probably a top 12 to 15 pick in the draft.
Yep.
He's bigger, probably better athlete, more versatile. I think it's pretty easily Neighbors, I think, for me. And I'm not a huge Olave guy. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong, he's a good player. But I think there's still a chance that, when New Orleans moves on from Michael Thomas and what other guys they have there, like there's a chance that they add another receiver, right? Like they could add a first round receiver or a second round receiver. There's a chance that Olave gets kind of the Devonta Smith type treatment, where someone else comes in and is like the alpha in the offense, and he's just a top tier complimentary number 2 guy. Just because he plays that same style, his play style is so similar, like a Calvin Ridley, where he's like a deep A-dot type of guy with not a lot of yak, and probably not a guy that's going to score a ton of touchdowns, although he did score a lot in college. I just think Neighbors has so many ways to win with his versatility, and plus we know, if you have them kind of on par with each other, you probably like the opportunity that Neighbors is going to be handpicked as a first round pick by a team that's, I'd say there's a pretty good chance they have a better offensive system and situation in place than what's going on in New Orleans with their quarterback play and what's going on there. Like Derek Carr's not great. He's going to be replaced in the next year or so. And then you have that risk as well where you might have a rookie quarterback come in and have to play that game again too with Olave in year 3 or 4. So it's close. I mean, I don't want to diminish Olave as a player. He's fine. He's probably close to a top 12 dynasty receiver, I would think. But I think Neighbors comes in it's hard to see him coming in outside the top 12 as well. So again, I think it's just they're similar enough that I'm taking the shot on the upside that Neighbors hits the ceiling and is a more valuable asset in a year or so.
Yeah, for me it's really easily Neighbors, and I like Olave. I agree. I think that Olave is a particular type of receiver that fits a particular type of role. I think that he is, and I think he's going to be very good, but I think that Malik Neighbors has a different level to his game that he can hit. I mean, when you look at it just on the raw numbers, Neighbors is gonna, by the time this year is done, Neighbors will have surpassed Jamar Chase in terms of receptions for that historic junior year that Jamar Chase had, and he probably will have surpassed him in yards unless he has a huge downturn in yards for these next couple of games, because he's already hit those numbers. And Neighbors' ascension has been, and his ongoing development of his game for the last 3 years has been really steady and consistent in a way that a lot of receivers nowadays we don't see. Like we don't see a lot what he has done to consistently improve and grow his game. His yak ability is much higher than Olave. I've said this before, he is a 50-50 slot outside guy. He literally lines up everywhere. He does absolutely everything in that offense. He can win. I guarantee you, when we see the reception perception charts come out, they're going to be green all the way around, because that Neighbors just wins every type of way that receivers can win. And I think his athleticism is higher, and I think he has a really special I think he has a special upside and special ceiling. I don't think he is I think there is a tier break between he and Marvin Harrison Jr., because I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has the wide receiver one overall upside in Dynasty that I think puts him a tick above Neighbors. But by Neighbors' third year, do I think Neighbors can come in and be rated higher as a sophomore going into his sophomore NFL season than we were rating Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave going into theirs? I think yes. And I'm absolutely going to swing at that upside. Is it possible he gets drafted by the Falcons? Yes. That would be unfortunate. I would hate that. It's a reality. It could happen. But right now, I'm going to take Neighbors over Olave easily for the upside. I just think he's a special player, and he's just shown it too consistently for me to not go with him.
Yeah, I think if Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't in this draft, I think Neighbors would be a lock for a top 10 pick.
Lock.
And I think there's still an outside chance that he is a top 10 pick.
I think that's right.
And people just, he's pretty easily not everyone's, but most people's wide receiver twos. And I said before, like a few weeks ago, I said that when I didn't. It's strange because I've been on him for so long and I've been a fan of his for so long. But coming in the season, I didn't think there was any way he was gonna jump Egbuka for me. I thought, Egbuka's been hurt, and Ohio State hasn't been the same offense. They haven't been I didn't think there was any way he was going to do enough to pass him, and it's not even a question anymore. There's no way. I don't see any way I could have Egbuka over Neighbors at this point. And I think Egbuka's probably on the fringe of being a top 15 wide receiver as well. The injury really hurt him, but I think those guys are in a pretty clear tier ahead of the rest of the guys who are also really good prospects in this draft. And I think that's, like we talked about earlier, I think that's where you can draw the line, that you can make the argument that those three are better than any prospect we had last year coming in.
Yes.
I still think you can make the argument that Egbuka he's a little bigger and a little better athlete than JSN. And I think he has more production playing out wide as well than in the slot. And he's like a really, really, really special kick returner as well, which I don't think he's done as much this year as he did like his freshman year. But I think you can still make the argument that Egbuka is a better prospect than JSN or Jordan Addison or anyone else that went in the first round last year. So that's where I'm at with them.
I am there as well. It's pretty easy for me. And we'll never know what would have happened if Egbuka could have stayed healthy or not had Uncle Rico throwing the ball to him this year. But hey, it is where it is. And Neighbors has earned it, man. Like Neighbors has taken, I have some Neighbors, and I will admit, I did not see this level ascension coming. I thought he would be really good. I thought he'd be in that 3 to 5 range, but he has put himself up there above Egbuka solidly. There's almost a tier break, which I'm hesitant to put in, but it's almost like Harrison tier, Neighbors tier, Egbuka tier, and then you get into the 4 to sort of 7, 8 guys that are all on a tier for me. That's kind of how I'm looking at this class right now.
The real interesting thing when it comes to Neighbors is that I kind of think that, a year or so from now, that we're going to realize that the Jaden Daniels ascension is owed a lot more to Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. play than to Jaden Daniels putting it all together in this 5th year.
Which is a perfect segue into our next this or that, which is another hot topic for the 24 draft class coming up. And we do have one. JJ McCarthy is not a lock to declare for the draft. I still would bet that it's likely, but there is the potential he comes back. So, Todd, are you taking Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy, this or that?
I'm taking JJ McCarthy pretty easily here. And it sounds funny because Jaden Daniels has been just annihilating the competition this year. His like counting stats and stuff are unbelievable. But he's still like a 6'3", 175-pound kid who I don't think his athleticism and like his rushing ability is going to translate to the next level. I don't think he's going to be a dual threat quarterback. Like his athleticism will help him with like escapability and that type of stuff, but I don't think he's going to be a true dual threat. So I think that kind of thinking is getting a little aggressive. And JJ McCarthy is like the tools guy. Like you heard it all last year with like Will Levis and those kind of people scouts falling in love with tools, quote unquote tools. But I think JJ McCarthy, who hasn't been super productive and has kind of struggled the last few weeks, I guess. But they play such a conservative offense and they just don't have to take chances that it's hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge what he could do in those situations because they basically like against Penn State, they basically just took the ball out of his hands. He had like 6 pass attempts and people got all over that and were like, oh, this is proof he's not a first-round quarterback. Like, I don't think that is proof because when he goes to the combine and you see him run around in shorts and a t-shirt, he's going to test incredibly well. He has a really live arm. His movement skills are pretty special. I think he has like his athleticism is not, it's also not like I don't think he's a true dual threat guy, but I think he has really special like escapability and that type of athleticism where you see like the top end quarterbacks know when to push it, when to run for first downs, and when to leave the pocket, and they're not always looking to run. I think he has that kind of ability where he's like my comp. I always joke around and say he's good Daniel Jones. I think he has that type of upside from a rushing standpoint where he has like the 500 or 600 rushing yards this season. And I think he's probably I would hope a better passer than Daniel Jones has been. But I mean, this season's been a write-off, but Daniel Jones was also like a top 10 quarterback last year for fantasy. Got a $40 million a year extension, and people were all over him this year, drafting him as like a QB2, top end QB2. But it just didn't pan out, and then he got injured. But I think McCarthy package is a lot more attractive at the NFL level than Jaden Daniels is, to me, anyways.
If assuming JJ McCarthy comes out for the draft, who do you think goes first?
I think McCarthy does. I think scouts when they get to see him in person, and run through their drills and everything, I think he's just a far more impressive athlete and tools guy than Jaden Daniels is.
Interesting. I mean, this is a very hard one for me at the moment because of what Jaden Daniels is doing, and it's hard to ignore the noise and it's hard to ignore the production. I have had JJ McCarthy higher by a good margin for most of this year, and so I am going to stick with that analysis at this point still. Daniels is making it harder. I think the thing with Daniels that brings me pause is his style of play. Again, I don't know how his style of play is going to translate to the NFL. If you're asking me sort of Jaden Daniels versus Anthony Richardson, I'm taking Anthony Richardson 10 times out of 10. He's 3 years younger, first of all, even though he's in the NFL right now. And he is, I'm guessing that it might be 2.5, but he's notably younger. And I just think his arm size tools are just at a kind of different level even than Daniels are. So I'm going to stick with Richardson there, but I could see a world where a team falls in love with Jaden Daniels, takes him incredibly high in the draft, and he is going to really throw a wrench in Superflex Dynasty draft decisions. Like I see that world in which it happens. I'm not sold on it yet. I think you might be right that scouts might actually still keep that going, but there has been enough success with some of these dual threat guys coming out that I think they might take a shot on Jaden Daniels, and I wouldn't be surprised about it. At the moment, I'm sticking with JJ as well, but it's going to be one of the most interesting draft stories coming out, and Daniels has a legit shot at the Heisman and is getting a ton of buzz for it right now. So it'll be really interesting to see. I'm still on McCarthy for the long-term projection, long-term potential, as you are, but I'm interested to see how the Jaden Daniels thing goes. And I think his value is going to be potentially high, and he could be a guy that, for me at least, I may be looking to, if I end up getting shares of him, I may be looking to move those at a high premium when I can, because I'm not sold on him for the long term, despite what he's doing being pretty impressive so far. We've got a Devy specific one for you, which is 2 running backs in the same backfield. This or that, Nick Singleton or Katron Allen, just like we all predicted.
Yeah. This one's difficult for me because I still had Nick Singleton last time I did my rankings update. I still had him as my RB2 in Devy, just because that size speed combination is something you can't teach, and like if he puts it all together, he's a rare athlete for the size. But I've said for a while that I would not be surprised if Katron Allen's a better NFL running back because he just does everything better than him. He's a better pass protector. He's got better vision. He plays within structure better. I don't know. I think this is tough. I think it's Katron Allen for me, with hesitancy, because I don't know that, like, if I'm at this level with Singleton, I think it's like I don't have any shares of him. I don't think I'll ever have any shares of him because I'm not comfortable buying in where you're gonna have to pay prices, because people are still gonna draft him in the first round of Devy and C2C startups next year. I've seen too much negative 2 seasons now of him still holding out hope for potential. At some point, like, the potential's got to equal production, or at least glimpses of it. And I just don't know. I don't think I could pay the premium to buy in on just an athletic profile anymore on him.
Yeah, I'm with you on value. I'm taking Allen for sure, and I have no Singleton shares, and I definitely won't ever, because you're right. His value isn't going to dip enough where I'm going to feel comfortable. There are going to be wherever his value is, there are going to be too many other wide receivers that I want at that place, and I'm never going to want to pay up for what he's going to be worth, probably. And I do hold out. The athletic profile is outstanding, and I guess it's one where I'm comfortable missing on it, and I'll take Katron Allen 2-3 rounds later in a startup draft, which I did a couple times. I have a couple of Allen shares, and we talked about that a bunch. That was a strategy I had going into drafts. I'm like, all right, someone can take Singleton in the top 5, and I'll take Katron Allen in the 4th or 5th round. And I would rather have a 4th or 5th round Katron Allen than a 1st round Nick Singleton, pretty safely. Despite the idea that Singleton could deliver a different level of potential, I still hold out that possibility. I guess it's one I'm okay on missing on if I miss it. Like, I've resolved myself to that one for sure. We have a couple more that we do not have images for anyone who's watching, which I think most of you are listening, but anyone who's watching, you'll see the images have disappeared. But we have a couple more for you, so enjoy these. This is a hot one right now. This or that, Tank Dell or Xavier Worthy?
Yeah, this is where we're getting spicy, because
Yes.
you have both ends of the spectrum with this one, where I think people are getting a little ahead of themselves in Dynasty with Tank Dell. I've seen like a couple takes of him being like assuredly a top 15 Dynasty wide receiver at the moment. And then I think people are too, like, Devy people or draft people, whatever the case, I think they're too low on Xavier Worthy. I still have the belief that when Xavier Worthy finishes the season, declares for the draft, goes to the combine, I still think he's going to run in the 4.3s. People are going to see, like, you can't teach that speed, and I don't think he's getting out of the first round. So for me, I'm more interested in the first round Xavier Worthy than what Tank Dell is right now, which he's been really, really excellent. But I just have that same feeling with Tank Dell that I have with Olave, that I could easily talk myself into seeing Houston investing in a first round wide receiver, and all of a sudden Tank Dell is playing more of a complementary role. So I think like Stroud's been unbelievable for a rookie quarterback. So that can't go under the and it's been talked about since like camp and since after the draft that CJ Stroud specifically asked them to draft Tank Dell. So I don't know if they just worked out together or if he just saw something in him that he knew would complement his skill set and how he likes to play the game. But I think there's also the possibility that Houston looks around and at the other young quarterbacks in the league that have struggled, like Justin Fields, for instance, and say, we're not going to do this to our quarterback. We're going to give him every chance to succeed and keep succeeding. And they invest in like a first round wide receiver. Say they draft Emeka Egbuka to reunite with Stroud, and then he becomes like the main volume hog on that team. Then Dell plays like a complementary role. So I don't know. I just don't. It's hard to say. Like at some point, you got to push your chips in. Like I think Tank Dell's he's like similar, not the same production yet, but like the same kind of thing with Puka Nacua, where like people keep waiting for the bottom to fall out. At some point, you got to be comfortable pushing your chips in and being like, okay, I've seen enough, and this has the potential to be something. But at the same point, he's an undersized fifth-year guy from a G5 program who has like four really good game sample size so far in his rookie year, that they're always afraid that something else is going to go wrong and like they're going to bring in someone else. Like it's almost like a Darnell Mooney type of second season where he was like the de facto number one guy because there was no one else there. And we saw Nico Collins like start off the season hot too, but it's kind of like neither one of them have produced at the same time. I think maybe they might have like one overlapping game where they're both kind of productive, but it's kind of like ricocheted back and forth. And I think Nico Collins has missed a few games with injury too. So I don't know that Dell is for certain the top guy there going forward. And I just think Xavier Worthy has a higher ceiling if he hits it. And I like I said, I'm still comfortable projecting him as a first round pick. So if someone spends a first round pick, a top 20 pick, targeting Worthy for that exact skill set, then I still think it has a higher ceiling down the road.
Yeah, it's super spicy. I saw Tim Alb from C2C, who I know we're both fans of, tweeted that he would put Dell above both Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith right now, like right above Waddle and Smith in his wide receiver rankings, which is interesting. The other thing to take into account with Dell is age. Like Dell is 24. He is younger than Jalen. He's 9 months, I think 10 months younger than Jalen Waddle, but they're both 24. So it's interesting where you're going to have a 21-year-old Worthy versus a 24-year-old Tank Dell as well. So just in terms of dynasty longevity, it's a Worthy thing. I'm kind of with you. I've seen a lot of questions about Worthy. So I've seen Worthy getting compared to Quentin Johnston on Twitter because of hands, which is I went back and looked, and look, if you want to look at just straight drop counts, which is not the only way to look at hands. So just for anyone listening, drop counts is not the only way to look at hands. And we've seen on the NFL level, guys like Deontay Johnson, who have been criticized for high drop counts, but just are wizards at getting open. Like, I want to say to anyone listening who is questioning this about Xavier Worthy, and you've heard what we've said about Neighbors and Egbuka, Worthy's speed is different. It is a different level speed. Like you mentioned 4.3, I think his speed is very, very different. I think, he's going to for sure he's for sure up and above 22 miles per hour on the speed gun guy. but he's a different level fast, and he is really skilled at getting open. And he hasn't been utilized in the best way in this Texas offense this year. I don't think, actually, the last 2 years. What he did as a freshman was absolutely historic, and kind of similar to Travion. You can't actually. It's important not to forget how impressive that was, especially for a freshman wide receiver. We talked ad nauseum about how low the year 1-0 counts are for a reason. So to walk into a program like Texas as a true freshman and put up the numbers that he did is pretty noteworthy for what type of noteworthy. There we go. Little pun for you. It's important to think through that when you're looking at Worthy as a prospect. And this one's really close for me. I sort of don't know. I think right now, if I had Tank Dell and I could trade Tank Dell for Xavier Worthy plus, that would be a worthwhile exercise for me, because I think Dell's value is going to be higher. I think if I'm pressed, the speed upside for Worthy is different. It's closer to Jamison Williams level speed, and I think Worthy is a better receiver than Jamison Williams is. He's better. I think he's better at everything, frankly, from a wide receiver position, at actually playing the position. So I think he's that level of speed difference, and I will very slightly go Worthy right now, but the situation thing is huge, and Dell being tied to Stroud with a connection is a big deal. So it's not easy, but I will also go with Worthy here. The last one we want to talk about is little G5 fun from Todd and I, our favorite topic here. We are talking about 2024 NFL draft prospects that are going to be sitting there probably in your third and fourth rounds of your dynasty startup drafts, dynasty rookie drafts next year. And that's Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky and Torrey Horton from Colorado State. I'm jumping in here. This one is Horton for me, and I've seen a lot of Malachi Corley love on my timeline and out pretty publicly. And I have been, since actually in episode 1, I think I talked about Torrey Horton as a potential upside candidate for this, as a stock up for this year going into the year. And look, if we're talking about a G5 prospect and I have choices, you've got one who is a 6'2", almost 200 pounds, I believe, wide receiver from Colorado State, who's playing under Jay Norvell, who coached Marvin Harrison Sr., Reggie Wayne, developed guys like Romeo Dobbs. Like he's got a track record of coaching and developing NFL receivers. Horton has had the last 2 years, he's had 2 years of really high level production at Colorado State. He could have transferred anywhere he wanted and decided to stay at CSU to be loyal to Norvell. And his role this year has changed significantly. And it's one of the things I really like about him as a receiver, that he's diversified how he plays a lot. Last year, he was a much higher ADOT, more of a big play outside threat. He has increased his slot percentage by almost 10% this year. And it's some of that is need based. When you play at these small schools where they don't have a lot of talent, like they needed they needed him to play all over the field. And he has filled that role. He's got a better slot grade than Malachi Corley does, who plays exclusively in the slot on PFF. And I know PFF grades are not perfect metrics, but it's noteworthy to me that he's got a better slot grade than the slot wizard himself. And is Corley a system guy? Like, this is Western Kentucky slot receivers in a Helton run program have been a thing. I do not think that. I think the Malachi Corley hype over Torrey Horton, to me, doesn't make sense. I'm going to stick with Horton for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty easily Torrey Horton here. The 6'2", 200-pound guy with ball skills and versatility. Yeah. And he returns punts too.
He returns punts,
which is pretty impressive. G5 guys are not my real cup of tea, but I think Torrey Horton and Ricky White from ULV would be the guys I would probably take a shot on this year. if they both declare. I think they'll both declare. There has been a lot of quarterly talk, and this kind of happens every year once we get down to like the Senior Bowl time and that kind of stuff. There's always like these guys always make a buzz, and very few of them hit. Tank Dell hit last year, but Tank Dell is much different player than Malachi Corley is. For me, I said this would be like a 2-for-1 take for me because I kind of pushed back when people were talking about the big thing with Corley is people keep talking about how he plays in the slot and he like takes the ball to the backfield every once in a while, and he has this. People keep saying he plays like a running back with the ball in his hands, and that's his skill set and what's going to translate and separate him. And if that's the kind of guy you're looking for in this draft, I would take Anais Smith from Texas A&M 100 times out of 100 over Malachi Corley. He's a guy that I think he should go to the Senior Bowl too, I would think. If you don't know his story, he started as a running back at Texas A&M and was pretty successful. He has pretty good, decent production on a per touch basis in the SEC, which is pretty impressive. And then he kind of just moved over to like slot receiver because they had nobody there. They had, before the Moose Muhammad class came in and before Evan Stewart, A&M had zero offensive weapons on the outside. So he kind of moved over there out of necessity. So he's been like productive and successful in the SEC at both the receiver and running back. He's got really nice verified athletic testing. And that's just the guy that I would take every time over a G5 guy who I have pretty big question marks about his athleticism, translating to the NFL. And I think Anais Smith is a dark horse guy that he's going to be one of these day 3 guys that he's going to find a role on a team. Like, hopefully it's a creative offensive coordinator at least who gets him like multiple touches and stuff every game. But he's definitely one of those guys that if he finds himself on like Buffalo or Kansas City or one of those teams like that, he makes it for like a really interesting dart throw in probably the 3rd or 4th rounds of your draft. He's probably like a 4th. I don't think he'll go in the 3rd round. He'll probably like a 4th round draft pick. But his ability to play special teams will give him that advantage over other day 3 guys going into next year to make a squad. So yeah, he's the guy. If that's the kind of guy you're targeting, like you think is going to play that kind of role at the next level, Anais Smith is the guy I would take every time over Malachi Corley. But for Corley and Torrey Horton, it's Torrey Horton easily.
Yeah, and on Anais Smith, Anais Smith is a 5th year. He's a 5th year guy, but he's only 22 and he's turning 23 in May. So he'll be a little older. But again, we're talking about Tank Dell. We're talking about as a potential top 12 ranked dynasty receiver right now, and he's 24. So don't overestimate the age category. And as an 18-year-old true sophomore at Texas A&M in 2020, Anais Smith had 43 catches for 564 with a 13.1 average and 6 touchdowns. And he had 49 carries for 293 with a 6-yard per carry average and 4 touchdowns. I mean, that talent to do that at that age in the SEC, and then he has been hit by injuries in the last couple of years a bit. But when he's been on the field, he's had a major and really diverse role and is a really interesting guy to take a look at. So I love the Anais Smith idea there. And I would also I'd wait, and I would not. Malachi Corley is not a guy I'll probably have shares of because I think he's going to get the amount of buzz that is going to put him in a draft range that I'm not going to really want to take the risk on him. And he hasn't, with what he was projected to do this year, I know he had a little bit of injury, but I just haven't seen the same. I haven't seen what was expected of him put out on the field. And even in that Western Kentucky offense, this past weekend, he had a big game. He went 10 for 171. The 4 games before that, he did not have more than 6 catches or more than 78 yards. And he played against New Mexico State, UTEP, Liberty, and Jacksonville State. Those were those 4 games. And he's not putting out that I think if that's a guy that you're talking about is dominating at that level, that's just not the level of domination that I want to see if I want to think about projecting it to the NFL. And he just doesn't have the same level of versatility or size that a guy like Horton has. It's not that Horton hasn't had a down game, he has, but it's a different when you're talking about a 6'10, 6'2, 200-pound guy who can return punts, it's a different ballgame for me. So I'm with you on that one. I'm Horton over Corley, and I am Anaya Smith over Corley as well.
Also, of the opposite opinion, I don't think Corley's going to go get drafted high at all.
Oh, you don't?
I think like there's guys because of the COVID year, and there's guys that are like senior guys that were former like pretty high recruits. I think those guys will all get more. I think they're all better athletes and will all get more buzz than him. Like I think like Keandre Lambert-Smith, I think Jermaine Burton from Alabama, I think he'll go. I think if I'm an NFL team and I'm taking a guy,
Roman Wilson,
I'm taking a shot on like a third or fourth round wide receiver, and those guys are there. Even like Isaiah Williams at Illinois, who's a converted quarterback who plays kind of a similar role. He'll be a slot guy at the next level. I think I'd take him over Corley. I don't think Corley's going to go as high as people think he is. I think he was kind of like everyone's favorite dark horse pick for a guy that, G5 guy that wasn't on everyone's radar at the start of the season. And, people like to be ahead of the curve on those type of guys, but I think there's way too many guys in this draft that have the pedigree and athleticism that kind of dwarf what he does. And I don't think, like Ricky White was a guy I just mentioned, I don't think I would take Corley over any of those guys. I don't think he'll go before the fourth or fifth round personally.
I mean, the only way the athletic testing for him is going to be like if he runs faster than we think, let's have that. We'll have that conversation at that point. If he does not run, and it sounds like you're thinking, and it's very possible, if he runs in the low 4.4s, 4.5s kind of range, I think it's going to be tough to project him at that level. I do think you're going to get Tank Dell talk though. Like he's going to get Tank Dell comparisons for sure, because he's a small guy coming from a small school that has produced at a high level and remember, Tank Dell ran a 4.5. So I guarantee you we are going to hear tons of Malachi Corley, Tank Dell comps coming into this year. And that's going to happen. It's going to happen. We should buckle up for it. There's no way it's not going to happen, but I'm out as well. It's going to be fun to see. All right, let's do a little stock up, down, and next man up before we hit it for the night. For my stock up this week, I'm going to give a little love to Jalen Milroe, a guy who we've talked around but never given the official stock up label to. Jalen Milroe has put himself in conversation to be a top 3 QB in 2024 easily, and even to be in contention to be the QB 1 or 2, I think. His passing metrics are really impressive, and he is seemingly just getting better with every single game. He's made Alabama into, I think, the biggest threat to be the national champion. I think Alabama is going to be hard to beat, and I'm not actually sure that Georgia beats them this year. I think Milroe might actually put them over the top, and I think Milroe is interesting. It's interesting seeing what Jaden Daniels is doing. It's interesting to think about Milroe. I think a year from now we'll be talking about Milroe as a better prospect than Jaden Daniels is being talked about right now, and I think he's just going to be, I think he's a really interesting kid who's got an actual NFL future with what he's doing. And I'm excited to see how he continues to develop over the next couple of years and how that Alabama passing attack continues to grow and mature. But he is my stock up for this week. He has been, I don't even feel like I need to quote the numbers because he's been just, it's been so noted how good he is. And in some ways because of Jaden Daniels' ascension, it's been missed slightly how good Jalen Milroe's been, but he's just been absolutely dynamic, both running and passing the ball, and he's showing the ability to be a pocket passer. He's not just running the ball; he's actually showing the ability to stay in the pocket and dissect SEC defenses. And turning Jermaine Burton into a prospect again. Jermaine Burton was dead, and now I think you're right. I think he's now got a chance to get drafted again, which is interesting. And I wouldn't have expected it to go this way, but it has. So Jalen Milroe for stock up, QB from Alabama.
Yeah, he's a guy I could have had on the too low show. I did not see this coming because he looked atrocious as a passer every time he stepped on the field. Granted, it was in very limited play, so it's difficult to get in rhythm and that type of stuff. But he looked lost as a passer in the 2 seasons prior to this one when he got in the games. But now he's got to be firmly within the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks next year.
Easy for me.
All right, my stock up is Ruben Owens, freshman running back from Texas A&M. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's a 5-star coming in. He has really modest production on the season. He has 88 attempts for 338 yards and 3 touchdowns. So just under 4 yards per carry. Not great. But same thing. It's hard to get in rhythm. He's just getting a handful of touches here and there. He does have 11 catches for 101 yards, 9.2 per reception. This past game, with their first game without Jimbo, they kind of handed the ball over to him. He out-touched the next running back 20-6. He had 18 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown, 2 catches for 18 yards. It was against Abilene Christian, so not the highest level of competition. But like we've talked a bunch with the way the running back landscape is in Devy, and this class was not a particularly strong class. Next year, the 24 class is not a particularly strong class. We've seen all the question marks around Nick Singleton. Ruben Owens has really, really good top end speed, and he's a home run hitter. So he's a kid that I think I have a hard time probably leaving outside my top 5 Devy running back going into next year, just because if he hits his ceiling, it's immense. His junior year in high school, he didn't play his junior year. It was junior year in high school in 21-22. He played 4A in Texas, which is not the highest level, but a couple steps below it. He had 248 carries for 2,989 yards and 46 rushing touchdowns. And then another 15 carries for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's been clocked at 10.68, 100 meters, so that's in the low 4.4 range as a running back. So yeah, like I said, like I have a hard time having like him and Baxter both outside my top 5 Devy.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you rank him against Baxter?
I have Baxter high.
Have them basically.
I have Baxter. Yeah, well, I have them back to back. I actually had Justice Haynes as my top running back this year.
Right.
So all 3 of those guys will be like, I don't know, I guess that's second
in that
tier.
range. Yeah.
Justice Haynes, I think, is a guy I think you can wait on, because I have a feeling he's going to get the Jay Miller.
He's going to get the Jay Miller treatment. Yep.
I think Jay Miller is going to lead Alabama next year. I love Jay Miller, and I will go down swinging with Jay Miller. Yep. I don't really care. So I think Jay Miller could have like a Jonathan Brooks type ascension next year, but that's besides the point. But I think Baxter's probably not quite the athlete as Ruben Owens is, but I think he's a better all-around running back.
Let's hope Jay Miller is more Jonathan Brooks and less Jace McClellan. How about that one? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
With that said, Jace McClellan could be a really fun little late pickup in your upcoming rookie drafts, assuming he declares, which I'm assuming he will. But
yeah, he will.
Great. Stock down. Start us off. Who you got?
My stock down is Dylan Edwards, the tiny running back from Colorado.
He is pint-sized. He's
a
small man.
This is pure pettiness and spite on my behalf. But if you remember the first game against TCU this year when Colorado scored a shit ton of points and everyone was all over them riding their coattails and they were going to have this magical season, Dylan Edwards, who's listed at 5'9", 170, which I doubt he hits either one of those, he had 4 touchdowns in that game, 1 rushing, 3 receiving. He had like 135 receiving yards in that first game. He hasn't scored a touchdown since. He has 125 receiving yards since, and he has 75 carries for 320 rushing yards and one touchdown, but not since the first game. So he's literally done nothing since, and there was all kinds of hype about him being this huge Devy asset because he was going to be used in so many different ways in that offense. When Shadur was quarterback 1 and they were whatever, everyone was on that bandwagon at the start of the season. But generally 5 5'7" or whatever he is, 170 running backs I don't touch them in Devy. I didn't even rank him as a Devy asset because there's just no way I'm taking a shot on him. Like, it would have to get to the point where he had like a Deuce Vaughn type of career before I'd even consider paying attention to him. And even then, it's probably not worth it for the NFL anyway. So I don't think he's a Devy asset whatsoever. And it was frustrating to see that kind of talk. And yeah, I'm spiteful.
Just to be clear, there was no one on this show aboard the Colorado Hype Train at all, or making you listen to talk about it every week. No one on this show.
Yeah, no, it
Only
didn't happen.
people off the show. I was not. Dylan Edwards was not a Devy asset for me, and
No, but
I still, yeah, that was not a thing. So I'm all on board with that call. My stock down this week is Jamari Thrash, a guy that we have talked about definitely a lot off camera, not as much on camera. I had seen for a while Jamari Thrash was getting thrust up into sometimes top 12, top 15 rankings for wide receivers coming out in this 24 class. Jamari Thrash is a wide receiver at Louisville. For anyone who doesn't know, he transferred from Georgia Southern to Louisville. And I always get Georgia Southern, Georgia State mixed up, but I think I got it right now. He played for Clay Helton at Georgia Southern. And he had an amazing start to the year and was vaulting up draft boards. I personally never really saw it. He was a really nice CFF asset, but I never really saw NFL next level potential. And in recent weeks, I know he's been a little bit hurt. So I don't know that he's been absolutely at 100%. But with that said, he has fallen off the radar, even on the C2C side of things, where the last 2 games, I think he's had a combined, 4 catches or something like that. Let's get the specifics. Yeah, the last 2 games he went 1 for 7 this week and 3 for 22 the week before against UVA. And again, he had been out the week before that, so maybe he has some kind of lingering injury. I just think the thing with a guy like him, who's a 5th-year older guy, transfer from a smaller program to a bigger program, and he became Jeff Brom's number 1 receiver. And we know that in CFF, Jeff Brom's number 1 receiver is going to produce. It's another thing of when you see numbers and you see a scheme, you have to be mindful of how those numbers relate to that scheme. And I think Jamari Thrash is a guy whose numbers relate directly to his scheme. He's not versatile. He doesn't play inside and out. He plays all outside. I think that his speed is overrated. I don't think he'll test incredibly well on the speed level. And for a guy like him to really produce, I think you really have to. And I think he is on his way down as an asset. I think he's a day 3 pick and not a 4th rounder. Personally, I think he'll go later than that. And I think there are going to be folks who will take shots on him late in 3rd, 4th rounds. I don't want him over any of the other guys we mentioned in that previous conversation. Frankly, I'd take Corley over him. I would take Corley over Thrash if I was pressed. I'm not going to have that option, but that's more where I think Corley fall. I think the conversation of Corley Thrash is an interesting conversation, and I would put guys like Horton White and Anaya Smith above them. But yeah, Jamari Thrash is my stock down. He has kind of, I think the bloom is a little bit off that rose, and I'm down on Jamari.
yeah, I think he's a CFF guy that should have never been a Devy guy. He's like G5 Tylen Wallace. He's like a 5.
Yeah, good call.
5'11", 180 pound.
Yeah.
Outside receiver, tons of contested catches, and
De'Ami Brown, Tylen Wallace, like that kind of profile that just hasn't translated well. Not versatile. I'm not in on him. All right, next man up, and then we will close it out for you. Who you got for next man up?
Yeah, I have Johan Cardenas. He's a running back from Texas. Plays St. Thomas Catholic in Houston, Texas. 6 foot, 215 pounds. He's the RB 38 in the composite. I have him a fair bit higher. I know he's in my top 20. I'm gonna say he's like my RB 15 or 16, I think. So 8 games this year, has 174 carries for 1,624 yards and 21 touchdowns, 20 catches, 291 yards in the touchdown. I wrote down for notes that like his strengths for his frame and his build, his 3-down skill set. He's got really good vision and patience for a high school running back. He's got decent initial burst. He breaks a ton of tackles. He's like 6'2", 215 for high school running back's a pretty solid sized kid.
Big boy.
For his like areas of improvement, I put he's not a top end athlete. He's going to Texas Tech next year, which I love that spot. If you see what Taj Brooks is doing there this year, he has a chance to take over there his sophomore season, maybe. I've talked tons about Michael Hudson on here, so I like the direction that school's going to. He plays in the TAPS league, which is like a all Catholic division in Texas. It's actually where Shedeur Sanders played and Preston Stone, the quarterback from SMU. They both played in that same division. So I don't know what the competition level is. It's still Texas high school football, but it's probably not highest level in Texas. But yeah, he's a fun kid.
Very nice. Mine is going to be Cam Williams, who was pretty recently got his 5th star from On3. So he is at least On3. He is now a 5-star wide receiver from Glen Ellen, Illinois, going to Notre Dame. He is listed as 6'2" and a half, 196 pounds, which is a big deal because a year ago, he's been one of the fastest risers in this class. He's been continually climbing up. He looked almost rail thin last year. He put on a good 20, 25 pounds in the offseason coming into this season. Wide receiver going to Notre Dame. Another interesting 5-star. This group of 5-star wide receivers is long, and what's interesting is how many of the guys in this 5-star crop are playing against really low level competition, and Cam Williams is one of those guys. So again, my concern with him is the competition level and how his skill set will translate. I have more optimism about Cam Williams translating for a few reasons. One, Cam Williams actually has played all over the field. So he plays 100% of snaps for his high school team. He literally is a guy, I've listened to his coach talk. He's like, I cannot get him to come off the field for a snap. He has to be on the field every single snap. It's like he's determined to be. He plays everywhere. He's a punt returner, kick returner, and also plays some running back. Like he had some significant reps at running back at 6'2", 200 pounds, 6'2", 2 and a half, 200 pounds. And he is really dynamic. So he gives me some, like watching him return punts gives me some Keon Coleman vibes from this year of watching him return punts because their build is pretty similar. Like Cam Williams looks like a big dude. And he's playing against somewhat lower level competition, as I said, but he looks really fast and big and looks like he is playing on a different level on that field in a way that some of the other guys we've talked about haven't always popped to me on tape. Cam Williams' speed legit pops, his elusiveness legit pops, his size legit pops. He seems to have some good route running abilities, and he's a jump ball guy. You throw the ball up, he's got very confident hands. He's also an academic. He's academically excellent, and guys like that are interesting to me. He's in all honors AP classes. His mom has 2 masters and a PhD, so she's like focused really heavily on the education side for him. So it's an interesting background to come in on, and I just think he's a guy, like just listening to him talk, he's an interesting guy for me. So since he's ascended into the 5-star range, he's going to be someone you're going to see talked about coming into your C2C and Devy drafts. Again, he is going to Notre Dame, which has shown this year that they will play freshman wide receivers. This past weekend, they featured, you look at their receiving report, and you've got 3 freshmen in their top 4 out of their top 4 receivers from this past weekend. You've got Rico Flores, Jaden Greathouse, and Faison, I think, were 3 of their top 4 guys. So they will play freshman receivers. I think he'll get some run as a freshman and hit at least year 1-0 thresholds is my prediction. And is a guy to keep an eye on because the size, speed, athleticism, if it translates. My concern is the translation with the competition level, but I think he's got a shot to translate it. So I find Cam Williams interesting. With that, I think that's all we got for today. Unless you have anything else. Have you looked at Cam Williams at all?
Yeah, I think I initially had him like my wide receiver, I want to say 19.
Okay.
But that's on junior tape. I haven't watched the senior tape yet. And I'm pretty sure there's I'm going to say 3 or 4 guys that I could think off the top of my head that he's probably leapfrogged as well. I know one of the guys that runs Cradle to Canton, Matt, who's Trash Pandas on Twitter, he does every year the big risers and he tracks those guys. And there's there's pretty big correlation to guys who are significant risers over their senior season to being like a positive, like really positive indicator of future success. So you can do pretty well just drafting those guys alone, guys that were big time rankings jumpers in their senior season.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I've known that to be an indicator. So I think Williams is a guy to keep an eye on coming into this class and see where he falls. With that said, thank you all so much for joining us again. As always, from Todd and Noah, have a wonderful week, a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday with your families, and we will see you next week for episode 14.
Yeah, the revolution, y'all. Yep, the revolution.
The revolution, y'all, will not be televised.
Yeah, you gotta wake up, open your eyes,
make a change in your life,
and find a new way of living.
It's time to start living for the children.
Everybody look into my life, tell me what you see. The perseverance of a young man sitting is so free. LA Mac, be the champ, but still fighting the struggle. They couldn't shut my mouth with a muzzle. I'm hard to figure like a puzzle. My name ought to be Jigsaw, rough around the edges. I've been known to spit raw, always with a pen and a book.